My name is Jason Chaskin. I work at the Ethereum Foundation, leading a team called App Relations. And I am excited for this panel because I'm definitely the least knowledgeable about agentic finance, which is why I have a lot of questions for these people that are a lot smarter than me in this context. So, yeah, want to introduce yourself now?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Oliver. I'm an investor at CMT Digital. We're a venture firm based out of Chicago, investing in early stage companies in the crypto space.
Hey everyone, James Beck. I work at ENS Labs. We do naming, so for wallets, different types of smart contract addresses, and now agents. So if you have an interest in, or many of you might already have a .eth name, maybe just a little like raising hands if you have a .eth name. A lot of people do. Okay.
Hey, I'm Vijay. I'm the head of product at Nava AI. We're building guardrails and audit trails for agents. So instead of just having this kind of human-influenced review reputation, you can have more like a track record, and that on top of that, you can build much more interesting things around the sort of clearinghouse, I guess, of agentic finance, which is what we're heading towards.
Awesome. Well, I am just going to start, and Marco will join when he comes here. So the first question is about the current state of the world. And by the way, this panel is purely surrounding identity, reputation, and verification, and yeah, all that stuff. So let's start with the current state of the world. If I wanted to build a fully self-sovereign agent today with portable identity and reputation that could move between wallets, apps, and networks, what pieces of infrastructure exist today? And what are we currently missing from preventing that world from existing today?
I kind of wish Marco was here so we could talk about 8004. But I mean, yeah, to sort of like try to answer for Marco, he, along with some other smart people, created this registry for agents. It's an on-chain registry. There's like 200,000 agents that have been deployed on the registry so far. And the idea is that if you are in an on-chain context trying to find an agent to do something, you can look at this registry and sort of see these human-assessed reputation scores of the agents. And I think the human-assessed part is important, related to other questions you may have. But yeah, Marco, I'm trying to answer for you what infrastructure we have today that lets you access agents. So I started talking about 8004.
Excited to listening to you. Please go on.
And then, like we heard other panels, everyone is talking about the various commerce protocols that big companies are making. So you have, UCP, you have machine protocol payments. There's a lot of companies that have an interest in making these protocols the de facto protocol for certain use cases. But I think, X402 with Coinbase is a different type of approach. It's more universal open standard. And I think 8004 is also similar to that, in which we're almost creating a registry in adversarial conditions where you don't have a whitelist of this company and this merchant is allowed to create a profile, or this agent is approved by this merchant to interact with it. It's really like everything crypto, which is built for adversarial conditions.
I think basically, what we believe is that there is kind of this gap around, especially the kind of verification part, but even on the reputation part. So, like we have actually a bunch of different systems set up for doing kind of agent-to-agent commerce, and they include these ideas of kind of the payment and the settlement and verification. But verification in that context is only designed as like, did this payment actually happen? Like, did this person actually pay for this service they're going to get? And not so much around like, did this kind of service or this like other agent actually perform the task that it was set out to do. And I think for us, that's a kind of critical gap. So the kind of agent-to-agent commerce thing exists, and the actual verification and the audit trail basically of, like I think a machine reputation is very different from a human reputation. I know we're going to talk about this in a minute, but like there is this gap around like we have this review-based like way of thinking about what reputation looks like right now on some of the registries, but like there's all this kind of other data we can get around how agents actually perform in real life from looking at how they interact, especially on chain. That I think is going to be very important to become part of those reputation systems in the future.
Yeah, I think like the obvious infrastructure that exists today are the agentic harnesses, so OpenClaw, Hermes, like these agents that can connect to all of your fragmented data silos, like your Google Workspace, bank account, crypto wallets. In terms of reputation, I think you kind of have to bifurcate it into two different categories of agentic transactions, so agents as a buyer and agents as a seller. When agents are a buyer of a product or service, I don't think reputation matters all that much. I think what's more important are, authorization, kind of like what Vijay was talking about, like how do you verify that what the agent is doing is what it was intended to do? How do you verify that, the payment method is legitimate, that it's not fraudulent? And then on the other hand, agents as sellers, I think that's where reputation matters a bit more. And I think reputation is a bit similar to how like a traditional business builds a reputation, right? Like, customer feedback, is it positive? SLAs, are they doing, revenue? Like if business is doing 100 mil ARR, that's probably a signal that they are providing a valuable service. So I think users and agents will seek out these agents selling products and find them in similar ways to how customers today evaluate and find traditional businesses.
Yeah, what's missing to have sovereign agents? So my mental model is that in terms of autonomy, you have like a scale. You have like humans using agentic interfaces, semi-autonomous autonomous agent that still answer and reports to me. And then you have a sovereign agent that is like a Frankenstein that takes control and goes on alone. The last one, sovereign agent. So yes, there was a lot of excitement at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025 with projects like Freza, Eliza. I see less interest now, and that's totally fine because we are not there yet. It will be a thing, but not now. We're not there yet. We made some progress in 2025. Amazing work of Near, of Fala, thanks to trusted execution environment. You can really create agents that not even the creator can destroy, because like in the Alien movie, they create another Easter, that's fine. We're not there yet. The problem is that it's still incredibly hard with my Hermes to book a restaurant. The problem is that when Delta Airlines lost my luggage yesterday, I tried to have my Hermes handle the situation, and it failed miserably. We're not there yet. So my mental model is that you need at the end of the day three things. You have the brain, which is the model, the body, which is the harness, the security, and then the world where to move, which includes infra, like the one that we will discuss, reputation infra, identity infra. I think that the models are great now, so the brain is fine. I think that the world in terms of infra, we are good to go. There is a lot of it we could improve, but we're good to go. Actually, we are pretty fed up with new standards. So the big missing point is the body, the connectors. This like open clothing of beginning of the year of, oh, it becomes great if we attach a Telegram channel to that. It's just a proof of how much we were like lacking very basic connectors. And so I think that the next big unlock will be from continuing to create better connectors, browser usage. Think about how much it's difficult to interact with a website. You need a residential proxy to send the request, otherwise it stops you because it sees that it comes from an AWS instance. It's so difficult. So connectors to make very easy for anybody, for non-technical people to really use an agent in a meaningful way, and as part of that, security. So it was really interesting what we heard today on the importance of the harness, on how do we prevent the agent of doing not the things that it was assumed to do, long-term jailbreaking, prompt injection, hallucination. That's a blocker now because the reality is that we cannot yet trust agents.
Moving on, James brought up ERC 8004, which has seen significant adoption according to Dune. There's been over 200K agent registrations. Have you guys seen any examples where they actually created real value by registering, or are we still in the cool demo phase?
I think we're still in the experimentation phase, not just cool demo, but experimentation for sure. For basically the reason that I was saying, it's not like a Web3 specific issue or an 8004 specific issues. The reality is that right now, in general, agents don't reach out to other agents to do stuff. And so agent identity, we're not there yet. We are in the previous step, which is, can I have an agent which is useful just for me? And of course, we already have amazing coding agents, but in general, we're not there yet. The next step will be, okay, can I reach out to the agent of somebody else? And the first step is, how do I decide if I want to trust him or trust the agent? And so reputation comes after. And let's see, I'm bullish on this. Maybe this will not happen because somebody say that an agent could, like, through skills or open source code, learn to do whatever any other agent could do, and the moat remains just data. Let's see.
I think like if you look at those 200,000 registrations, the real question is like how many of them are actually transacting, and how can you characterize those transactions? And I think like QuickNode data said something like 1.9 average like interactions, per agent, which tells you that not many of them are doing more than like running a sort of testing loop in that setup. And I think like shout out to the agent cache guys. Like there are a bunch of teams out there who are doing the kind of bootstrapping of like this two-sided marketplace of kind of like buyers and sellers basically, and building and sort of onboarding a lot more kind of like X402 MPP endpoints basically for services that are now able to kind of like provide these like agentic endpoints for interactions. The hard part is now going to be the demand side. So I think one of the cool clusterings you can see within that is like there are all these data endpoints for doing research, which is one of those things where there are loads of paid services you can buy, like paid services for company data, paid services for like personal like information, doing background checks and stuff, and sort of people who sit in the kind of Claude co-work camp of like slightly more abstracted, I guess, from wanting to kind of like install all your own things or vibe code your own things, like that category of person. I think like these sort of paid services actually work really well for because they basically allow you to, without going and grabbing a bunch of API keys or signing up to like a bunch of services, add these capabilities to your research workflow. And so I think they told me that somewhere like between like 5 and 30,000 like users in that sort of realm. And I think that's like legitimate stuff that's happening, but that's the only pocket of it I've seen like that has any kind of decent scale.
Let's move on. So do you guys think that there's anything fundamentally different about agent reputation versus human reputation? Or are we reinventing the same systems we've been discussing for years?
I mean, I think there is. So, like, think about a human reputation system. A human reputation is based on some, if you're thinking about a merchant, it's a brand, it's the trust in the brand, the quality, it's how long, so it's temporal, it's how long has this company been around. It's also a little bit based on social, humans are very social. So we sometimes feel influenced about a brand because someone we trust told us, hey, this is a trustworthy brand. An agent doesn't have a college degree, doesn't have any reputation in the same way a human does. And so actually when we think about 8004, this registry of 200,000 agents, right now it's actually, to me, it seems more like a human sort of verification of like, I'm going to give this agent 4 stars because it did the thing I wanted it to do. And that's kind of like a Google review of an agent. But that's not what I think an agent actually needs. An agent is, like if an agent is interacting with another agent, the thing that it needs is it going to do the task and what is its percent uptime? Or how often does it execute that task versus dropping it off somewhere along the way? And so like, maybe to plug ENS, because you're like, well, every agent in 8004 has this ID. To me, ENS is this, it's like a two-way model for verification. So one, if I'm a human and I'm looking at an agent and I'm potentially going to interact with that, or have my agent interact with that agent, I might want to know who deployed it. And so right now, if you go on 8004, you'll see an address. And it'll just be like an address, 0x, whatever. I know nothing about who is behind that address. So there's no way of like verifying whether or not I can trust. Is this an agent deployed by a company? Maybe not. And then the other thing is the persistent identity of, so like, when, maybe there's like a later part, but like, why wasn't human identity as portable on Web 2? I think the question is like, if I have an Airbnb account and I rent out a room, and then all of a sudden I decide I want to go on Vrbo, like Airbnb has no interest in letting my credentials and my reputation go to Vrbo. And ultimately it's just a little bit more friction for me. I can eventually get on Vrbo, I can have people attest, yeah, this is the same house, this is the same person, and build up that reputation again. An agent can't do that. So an agent actually needs to have that reputation persistent because it's not able to like, go and create a new service and create a new address and not have some sort of persistent identifier that this agent is deployed by a company that we trust and does the same thing. So that's like a longer take on why there's like different trust models for agents and humans trying to figure out whether to trust an agent.
Yeah, I think they're structurally different. Humans have limited capability of storing information and aggregating data at real time, which is why we created brands, and that have like long-lasting and are very valuable for who owns the brand. Agents can aggregate data in real time, which is why it's so important to have public data and not to create moats on data. So yes, I agree with the numbers. 2004, I think 1 to 2% of agents are active, which is a lot if in absolute numbers. We don't have yet like important place where people buy agents through 8004 just because it's agent to agent communication is still nascent. But I think the biggest achievement, because yes, now it's mainly people, humans using these registries, is in a sense a political achievement in the most pure way sense of a term, which is in terms of belonging to the city, which is how much is important not to remake the same mistakes that we've done in the past. You mentioned a couple of closed source platforms that owns the data of like their entire industry and try to make the data public in a public system. Will this win? Let's see. Will this be the only way to do that? Of course not. This will coexist with, but for the first time, we have a public place where you can put the data, somebody else can read the data, and there is no business that can create a moat and asking the 20% to start, 30, 40, 70. There are like ride-hailing apps. You can guess why that is now taking like the 50%. And I think that's good. And agents are smart enough to aggregate like millions of entries in real time and make the best usage of this public data.
Yeah, I think when an agent is a buyer or purchaser of a product or service, that reputation identity looks more like the human identity associated with that agent. So like, for example, if my agent goes and trades on Robinhood via MCP, it inherits my KYC credentials and wallet, whatever funds I have in Robinhood. When an agent is selling something, I think the reputation looks a lot more like business reputation. Kind of going back to my original point, if an agent is offering a valuable good or service, it probably at some point makes sense to them for them to incorporate if they're selling enough of that product. And then they would continue to build up their business reputation through SLAs, uptime, guarantees, things like that.
I guess like just to kind of maybe push back on that a little bit, I think, we talked a bit about this outside as well. Like as we sort of move into a world where agents are doing more of the buying themselves, then what they're looking at is like less of the kind of human markers, I think, of like quality and reputation, which are quite easily manipulated by marketing or by search engine optimization and stuff like that, and a lot more about like the actual kind of mechanical, like measurable characteristics. So definitely things like SLAs, but beyond that, I think things that are now becoming sort of provable, like especially with on-chain finance, which is like, performance or, the actual amount of volume like being served. And even sort of, you can have things like the footprint of your responses and stuff like that logged. One of the things we're trying to build is like these audit trails of agent performance. And I think when you sort of compare that against like how humans think of kind of reputation, like a bunch of different people have tried to put sort of numbers to human reputation, and it's always quite funny because like I think if you actually kind of think about it, like human reputation is almost like quantum. It's like it depends on the observer, it depends on the context, whereas like agent reputation can be like fully mechanical, classically computed, and especially if you have enough data points. And I think that's kind of the direction, is like we need to have more data about agent performance and stuff. And yeah, agent social graphs basically mean nothing, like the connections between them, but human social graphs are incredibly valuable, and that's kind of how you compute your way to figuring out whether someone's trustworthy, whether you trust them with like your life savings versus trusting them to kind of go and grab you a coffee is a very different computation, and like I don't think you can measure that in a sort of pure number.
Great points from all you guys. If we were to rewind 10 years ago, there were probably panels very similar to this one talking about how Ethereum would become the neutral trust layer for human identity, reputation, and credentials. While some progress has been made, I think it's fair to say adoption has been slower than most people, me included, expected. What lessons can we learn from that experience that we can take as we build the identity layer for agents?
One lesson there is that, I mean, I think it was pretty obvious when Ethereum had this idea of like an open social graph or even an address that can be portable and you can use the same one, you know, to take out a loan in Aave as you do a swap on Uniswap. I still believe in that world, but in terms of the whole Web3 vision of, you can take your social graph and, you know, build up an online social media reputation and then use that to create an account like a competitor to Airbnb. It turns out that humans were willing to recreate their online identities many times, more so than the companies were willing to forego having you only use Airbnb for identity verification. So like, in the long run, it's every single company, and we're going to see it again with these various commerce protocols, but they want you to stay with their moat, their competitive edge, is to use their system. And so like Ethereum, ENS, these are all very open systems, and they're kind of minimal ways of like creating the identity. And it's important to note, like ENS is not a reputation system. It's just a container for an identity. So you could have different reputation systems built on top of that, and you know, we might see a different one for agents as we would for real people. But ultimately, like, I almost see identity is not as portable with Web 2 companies because you can just create a brand new identity, nor do the companies want to share that competitive moat. But on the other hand, with agents, I actually think identity needs to be more portable, because if an agent is trying to be discovered as a merchant, it would actually need to do all the things it says it's going to do in order to be discovered and not passed over for the 10,000 other agents. Similarly, it's really quick to just deploy a fleet of agents. Like, it's, you know, it's a command, it's not a human being, which takes a long time for reputation to be built up and, you know, things that it can do.
Great answer. So we tend to live inside our crypto bubbles, and people in the outside world are also building identity, reputation, and trust systems for agents. What are the most interesting developments you've seen outside of crypto, and are they doing anything that we're not?
I mean, I think the case with most kind of like institutionally driven, like, I guess, approaches to things that we're doing in parallel to crypto is like you have like these kind of top-down approaches versus bottom-up approaches. I think in crypto we're very willing to over and over again reinvent things from scratch, you know, to our benefit and to our detriment. But that means that we're not really looking at it from a kind of like, you know, where is the policy currently? Like, where is the kind of like CIO view of these kind of big institutional companies, and like what does it look like to have these kind of enterprise grade like access management, you know, and identification capabilities. And so I think like there are all of these kind of checkboxes, I think, for how like certification and how kind of enterprise requirements are met that are coming out of you know, some of these other kind of protocols like the ones at Google and Microsoft for agent identity that are not carried through to kind of the more bottom-up approaches for now. But you know, I think like the kind of true like portability, I think that is something that still really only exists from the grassroots approach right now.
It's like if you're using Google's agent-to-agent protocol, would they want you to use an Anthropic agent or another agent? And I think it kind of reminds me of the enterprise blockchain stuff of 2018, where initially you have banks that are like, blockchain is going to change the world of finance. And then they created their own consortiums that ultimately were going to compete with other consortiums, or you were either going to be a part of their private network or not. And those kind of died. And what we were left with is stablecoins, which it's all about maximum portability. Can this work in all these different chains contexts? Can it be accessible by anyone around the world? Mostly. There's still some closed source elements to even USDC. So I think it's kind of like what Marco said. It's a political achievement. I don't know whether or not it wins, but I'd rather have an attempt at this that becomes an open standard. You know, people keep saying this on previous panels, like HTTP or email as the standard, because you know, if you had to create a brand new way of sending messages from an AOL account to someone with a Google account, that would be trash. No one would want to use that. ultimately SMTP became the method. Email is accessible by clients that any different company can access. And I also think that if we're talking about in a future 10 years, 20 years from now, where most humans are doing online commerce using agents, do I want one single company to own the rails in which that commerce exists? Definitely not. Because they're the ones that would then whitelist which merchants are allowed, which sellers are allowed. And that, we know, ends up being a political question as much as it is like a tech question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a problem if these big tech companies build standards that only benefit them. I actually think some of them are good standards. Like I think Google's UCP for agentic commerce is quite interesting. It's basically a way for merchants to make their inventories, catalogs, payment methods, fulfillment guarantees, all machine readable. And it's open, so any merchant can do this. They like it because they remain the merchant of record. And it really makes agents, it gives them the ability to talk to the merchant backend in a much more seamless way. So I think that provides some sort of trust guarantees to the end user of that agent. Because say my agent goes and just scrapes, Target's website, like they might get stale data. That's an issue. The user won't trust their agent after that. Versus UCP, their agent can talk directly to Target's backend, view everything live, and go ahead and complete a purchase from there. So I think, like to your point, like as long as these standards are actually open and it's not just benefiting one big tech giant, then I think it's a good thing.
My biggest learning, and not just on identities, generally on this like Web3 phase, also the disillusion with social fi, is actually the most basic lesson of any digital business course, which is how much distribution matters. And we have forgotten this or ignore that. And so how much controlling the top of funnel and having millions of users that like use your app every day can really help, has helped centralized finance, traditional finance application, or also like in Web3 application like MetaMask to be successful. Just we are close to the user, and this impacts a lot. And these guys we can't. This will stay. So to me, it's about open versus closed in a world where distribution matters. On identity, it's not super popular, but Apple and Google recently agreed with the World Free Consortium on something called digital credentials, which enable any application to ask to the browser to access a credential from a wallet of any kind. And so it's open. You have any wallet can provide a credential, any app can ask credential. This is still an open system, and that's good. Again, what I'm concerned about is when the system is closed and you can't access the data. What can go wrong? Let's make the example of reputation in agents we were discussing earlier. Right now, the vast majority of companies that are tackling agent security, since we don't have any reputation infra in place for MCPs that is reliable, is just whitelisting the MCPs that the employee can use. That's it. It's like in 1994, having American Online saying which website you could visit. That's the way to approach. That's the kind of things that are not sustainable, and that I think we should fight against.
Absolutely need to fight against that. So do you guys think that we are building reputation systems for agents to give reputation to other agents? Or are we building reputation systems for the humans actually behind the agents? If an agent develops a bad reputation, what's stopping the human from just spinning up a new agent and starting over?
Persistent identity. No, but I'm serious about that. When you look at 8000 Forescan, for example, you can see an agent's address that was used to deploy it. But what if the user of that, let's say this is a company and they're providing a service, and they actually have a lot of agents, and they use different addresses. Maybe they use base chain, maybe they use near. You need an anchor that tells you this is this agent, and it's a human readable name. So that's at least on the human trust side. But we, in a previous question, already said why human reputation and agent reputation is a pretty different thing and requires different speed at which you decide the reputation and can assess its reputation. So.
Yeah, and I'd sort of add to that, we want to add more data. We want to enrich those with more things for an agent to process, basically, right now there is this kind of like, I'm leaving a review, like a restaurant review, you know, about an agent, which doesn't make sense, you know, like this is a kind of mechanical thing that you can kind of validate its outputs and you can make those part of a registry of its past actions. Like once you collect all that history, that becomes like a much more deterministic way of thinking about like how much you trust this agent, what its reputation should be, and I think that's a missing piece right now. I think it's underinvested. But I think once we have that, then we will have a much more meaningful way for agents to assess other agents.
I think it's both. We need both. Now we have seen like Web3 projects working a lot on Web3 data signals, including 8004 and Web2 projects on the other hand. Of course, it will be both together. So if I'm interacting with an agent, old Web2 signals are crucial. How much is deep the balance sheet of a company behind that agent? What's the revenue of a company? What's the reputation of a CEO? All these things that we tend to like not ignore because we are in Web3 are super important. And I'm playing a lot on this, and we'll be maybe launching something soon. But agents will have will need to run at runtime due diligence on the counterpart, also using Web2 signals. Also around the people behind the agent. I totally agree with what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think reputation is in the eye of the merchant, right? One merchant's bot is another merchant's customer, right? So I think. Yeah, reputation on like the agent purchaser side matters for a few types of businesses, like businesses that require KYC, Robinhood, Coinbase, et cetera. But for most, like the merchant just wants to sell things, and if an agent is buying things, as long as it's not fraudulent, who cares what their reputation is?
So 8004 has been live for about 3 months. I'm curious, looking back, what are your guys' thoughts on the rollout? What has surprised you the most? What have we learned? Is there anything that you wish we could have done differently, technically, rollout adoption, all that?
That's, I guess, for me. Like the thing I think about like every day and night is build all this with Web2 people. So not seeing this as a Web3 thing. So what I would have done a bit differently is, and we have tried, by the way, but since the very beginning, engage also with Web2 projects and build them with Web. So I don't like this as like seen as a separate industry where there are like these strange people putting strange signals on this strange smart contract. I think this should be like part of like general signals around the business. So that's I think the. So the
like Google was a part of it though, right?
Say again?
Google was a part of 8004, right?
Yeah, Google is a large company. They have like different souls within that. But so the point is that we will never like win the customers if we don't win first the Web2 builder in why should I use this?
How do we better win the Web2 builder?
Thinking it's in like discussing the common problems which are all around security. So what's blocking now Web3 agents is not like something rocket science just for Web3 agents. It's like exactly the same thing. So I'm not giving $100 USDC to my agent, Web3 agent, for the same reason I'm not giving $100 to my Web2 agent. It's not a Web3 specific thing, which is that agents are incredibly easy to exploit. They hallucinate. Identity spoofing, it's incredibly easy. So this is the common language, and this is the problem that they are experiencing, the Web2 people. This they is already not good, but they are experiencing as well. So focusing on the common problems, and blockchain can also help with that, for example, with identity.
So we are at time, and this was not on the list of questions, so I'm going to put you guys all on the spot here. Just answer with the date and no explanation. When do you think more payments will come from agents than come from humans? Marco, you first. We'll go down the line.
If it's money moved and not agents,
okay.
Sorry, if money moved and not payments, it's already like that.
Say more.
As we speak, the large amount of the money moved in the last 1 minute is moved by algo trading since like 20 years ago. No, I think it's important to, because we think that we are in this new AI phase where like trading is already done by computers since If we're talking about agents operated by humans, that's 2 years.
2 years.
They will like refill my fridge, and yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, purely just for the commerce market, I would say, yeah, end of 2027.
End of
Yeah.
2027.
So less than 2 years.
I'll say 2040. I don't know. I'm not.
Are we winning something?
Because like the frame
I'll
of the
send you an
question is
NFT.
the frame of the question is humans using agents to do some sort of commerce.
Yeah.
I think we wildly overestimate how people even care about this technology.
I'm going to say 2027. I'm going to say that just because I think like when you account for micropayments, like that is a thing that humans aren't capable of processing. And I think like we're looking at all these APIs, we're looking at like how many different things your agent is able to do. And then as soon as you sort of fold in like all of these kind of, you know, X402 and machine payments things they're able to do, like then those are things that humans aren't capable of doing, basically, you know, like paying a cent every single time you make a kind of little request as part of a 1,000 requests, you know, to make your research report. And I think like that's just going to skyrocket.